virtual event that really kind of started with a smaller group of young alumni who were talking about ways where we can bridge the gap between our younger alumni or recent graduates with our kind of like our older alumni or alumni who are in career fields that they feel very experienced in. Kind of my background a little bit, just to give you some kind of ideas of what I have been up to. I have been working in public relations for 3 years and then moved over into staffing for almost a year. I was doing that in Portland, Oregon, and then I moved back to Big Island, where now I'm working in sales and marketing for one of the state's largest public corporations. So I'm lucky to be back home and working with people that are very familiar faces and brand new faces. And I'm also very lucky to be working with the alumni office on these kind of projects. So the staffing piece really kind of sat with me, and I was like, this is a cool opportunity to kind of build off of that and just kind of connect a network that is really special to us, which is Kamehameha School. So we are very thankful for the opportunities that the school has given us, and we kind of want to continue on with that legacy. So I decided to hit up 2 people who I believe are amazing in what they do. Drew Honda is obviously my classmate, who he's the owner of Sweet Enemy Clothing, a very prominent apparel line here in Honolulu, with an amazing story. So thank you so much, Drew, for joining us today. And Matthew, who is the editorial director at NMG Network, which is a very exciting media company based in Honolulu that I've been following for years and years. And I'm just so excited that, Matthew, you got on the call today. So thank you so much for joining us. Well,
thank you.
So yeah, of course. Just to kind of kick things off, I want you both to introduce yourselves and kind of tell me a little bit about your current role and what you are currently up to. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Drew.
No, sorry, you froze. No,
oh,
wait,
no,
I did not hear
it. Freeze?
I heard, tell me about yourself and your current, then I don't know, current
role, your current role, what you are up to.
Okay, who do you want to go first?
Oh, Drew, go first.
Oh, me first. Can you hear me? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Drew Honda. Currently, I'm a founder and owner of Sweet Enemy Clothing. It's a clothing shop that specializes in streetwear and thrift and vintage. We have a storefront location on South King Street, where the old McCully Chop Suey was. And then we also have an online store. But yes, I currently work my shop every day. That's what I'm currently doing.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so I feel like my connection is probably poor on my end, but I did get what we got from you, Drew. And then Matthew, if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Sure. Can you hear me on this or no?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I was taking a risk on the AirPods. Okay, everyone, I'm Matthew Dekneef. I'm the editorial director at NMG Network, which is a media broadcasting company that's based in Honolulu. The office is in Chinatown on Hotel Street, and they produce a range of different lifestyle brands. 2 of the more popular ones are Flux Hawaii, which is a arts and culture based video and print publication, and Lay, which is an LGBTQ traveler platform. And then we also have partnerships with resorts, hotels, and residencies across the state to produce in-room video and print content for them. And that's what I've been doing anyway for the last about 4 years with that company. But my background is in journalism. I have a degree in advertising, public relations from Chapman University. And I worked in the entertainment space in LA when I was living there. Moved back here about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. So I have some pre-panel kind of questions, just kind of ideas or questions that I'm going to ask you both, and you guys can just feel free to kind of engage. If anybody in any participants have any questions, feel free to utilize the chat, and then Auntie Nancy and Auntie Jackie will be able to bring up the question. Let me know if I'm freezing though, because I feel like I have really poor connection. So just flag me down and say, hey, you're freezing. Okay, so quick question to Drew. I have followed you ever since we graduated. And I saw that Sweet Enemy was inspired by your grandma's story. Can you kind of walk us through what that kind of started out like when you first wanted to start an apparel company?
Yeah, of course. So at that time, I was going to the University of Hawaii, and I was majoring in family resources. My sophomore year, 2012, my grandma passed away. She was in ICU for like 90 days. So I got to enjoy those moments with her and whatnot. But a few months later, I wanted to do something in honor of her. She played a huge role in my sister and my life, raising us as well as, taking care of us, living with us, all that stuff. So I, wanted to do something to honor her. And I was always into fashion. So what I did was I reached out to my sister randomly. And then I was like, hey, I want to do something in honor of Grammy. And then she's like, what are you thinking? So I told her I was, it was super generalized. At the time, I didn't know how clothes was made, that whole beginning process, whatnot. So it was kind of hard to start, but she helped me draw a design. It was on Sharpie and a piece of paper. It was a regular paper. And what she did is she took a picture. And from there, what I did was I called a whole bunch of printing shops to see who would print the least amount of shirts. Because at the time, I'm in college, I don't have a lot of money. And I found a place that said they could print 24 shirts or something. So what we did was me and my friend took that image on my phone to the print shop. And then I asked them, I was like, how are shirts made? I literally had no idea how shirts are made. So they kind of explained the process, whatnot. And so what we did was we drew this concept, which was my friend thought, he was our classmate, Jason Moroka. So what he thought of, it was called Love is Pain, kind of relating, this whole losing someone important in your life and all that type of stuff, right? So we wrote that on a blank t-shirt template, and he the people put it together in a computer file, which later I learned is called Illustrator, all that stuff, right? And he it came out nothing like how I drew it out, which is fine. We're so excited, oh my God, that's so sick. The logo's finally on a computer file, whatnot. So then we were able to print those shirts, and at the time I think I was selling t-shirts for $15. And yeah, I think I sold it all, which was a huge accomplishment. But yeah, just the process, not knowing how, I don't even know if I'm answering your question, sorry. Not knowing how t-shirts are made and just growing. Yeah, it was kind of inspiring from there.
So it was basically through trial and error is what you're saying. You just kind of did what you had to do.
Yeah, that's definitely to this day. As time went on, that's when I kind of learned what Illustrator was, or terms of printing, or how things are made, screen printing, DT, the terms, different terms. And to this day, I'm still learning. There's so much in fashion that trends and different type of products to be made, that it's all trial and error, and I just look back at that type, a moment like that, and it feels me even more, because it's just how far I've come from that day. It's it's pretty crazy. So yeah, there's always room to get better, and it's exciting.
Absolutely. So for Matthew, I know you have a pretty expansive career in the media industry. I know that you started off in kind of public relations. Your degree was in journalism and PR, which I also have that degree as well. So I'm very familiar with how all of that works. Kind of guide us through, kind of similar to what Drew was saying. He learned a lot in the industry by trial and error. Did you kind of experience that throughout your PR career as well as throughout editorial as well?
Yes and no. I did the thing I think a lot of I made the mistake that I don't even want to call it a mistake, but I did the thing a lot of young people do when they're trying to figure out their life, which is I want to get into a creative field, but like, I want to do something that either it satisfies like my family's insecurities. I want to do something that like has a clear path, that has like, that makes sense, that I can explain to people, that people will understand. So that's, I want to do something creative. I just thought advertising, that makes, that sounds like you can make money doing that. And I guess that's important. That's how like you establish status in front of people, especially when you're an insecure young person. But what's funny about that is my first job in advertising, like that's the only job I ever had at an agency. And I stayed there for maybe 6 months. Because as soon as I started working on projects, like in the real world, not just, case studies or through textbooks or like hypothetical ones you do in a team project with college students. It's like, for me anyway, I knew instantly, like, I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, this is just not a fulfilling thing for me creatively. So then I just interned at a newspaper because I just felt drawn to, I've always been interested in that type of storytelling. I've always liked reading. I've always like been into writing. So I did that on the side until they offered me a job. And then I left the advertising agency and started working there. And from there, that was like sort of my education in, I guess, in creating, I don't like this term, but creating content, and all the different variations and forms that takes. And so, yeah, it was definitely, trial and error is an interesting phrase that you use, because I think that is part of the attraction of working in a creative field, because it's subjective. Like if you're working at like if you're an accountant or you're doing another type of job and you make a mistake, like you're fired. But with something like that's a creative arena, is like, it's so subjective. Like there's sort of an understanding that sometimes good things come out of failures, or like it's more regenerative in that way. And I think that's why, the trial and error is sort of like this unspoken understanding, is like where you keep like trying to make ideas, you keep trying to pivot, you keep trying to do something new, you keep trying to challenge conventions, and you can do that in like any creative field. It's so broad. I'm talking about specifically about media, but it's like the same thing with fashion. It's the same thing with painting, making films, that type of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I definitely agree with that perspective on the whole trial and error thing. It's definitely what you kind of learn, and it is from your failures, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know. It's definitely not like the accounting example that you give us. Like, I think that is just a really great example, because in creativity is sparked by almost anything and everything, which is amazing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that tidbit with us. In the media world, you have to stay ahead of the curve. So how do you do that when you are, I hate the creating content kind of, phrase that everybody throws around these days. But I feel like you are more of like a storyteller. You kind of dive deep into these stories, these untold stories from not only Hawaii, but internationally as well. How do you stay ahead of the media curve and produce those stories in, say, Flux magazine or in lay culture?
I don't really think of it in terms of trying to stay ahead of anything. I just try to remain interested in whatever I'm doing. And for me, it's like, I think specifically in terms of if I had to really think about what I'm doing, I'm someone who, like, in terms of an editor, most of my decisions tend to be in a reaction to like erasure, like I don't see that in other places. That makes me more intrigued to want to explore that area and see if it could develop into a story. In a Hawaiian context, it's sort of amazing how little people know about Hawaiians in Hawaii, just if you want to think about it that way. So in terms of a media space, it's like my impulses tend to be born out of that sort of mindset where I'm like, I could read any story like in Star Advertiser and Civil Beat and wonder to myself as a reader, like, where's the Hawaiian perspective on that? And that inspires me to like just build a whole entire story around the Hawaiian perspective for Flux. So, it's not really trying to be ahead of anything. Honestly, I think it's mostly about going backwards or like looking back and like trying to like draw from another sort of worldview or another like subject matter that most people tend to not pay much attention to. So I think that's what makes, I mean, I just feel like focusing more on that for me is more rewarding than trying to be like, trying to scoop things or trying to like get an interview with someone that like no one can get. I mean, obviously that stuff is thrilling and it's exciting. Like I used to work in LA and that was the drive, like try to get the interview with the person that and try to get it first, you know? But after a long period of time, it's like that for me wasn't really that interesting anymore. So this is more sustainable to me. So I don't know, I guess to answer your question, I think you just have to redefine on your own terms what it is you're doing instead of like trying to react to the market or trying to think about like, what do other people want? Cause that you run out of fuel, or at least I feel like I do. I'm trying to do that because I no longer feel like I'm doing it for a community. I feel like I'm doing it for commerce, or I feel like I'm doing it for a market, or I feel like I'm doing it for someone else who like it doesn't really benefit them as much.
Got it. And Drew, would you say that when it comes to fashion, you know, everybody's trying to think a little bit more fashion forward. Would you kind of agree with what Matthew's saying and saying you have to kind of step back, take a look at what the past had for us so that you can kind of build your designs and integrate that into your apparel? Or do you constantly want to look at what the future holds and how you can make your brand a little bit more unique?
I think there's a couple of things. What vintage clothing is like probably one of my biggest inspirations when I design. A lot of their designs and their styles and all that stuff is like kind of how I create my, you know, graphic designs. As well as I feel like the Hawaii market is a lot more simpler than if you're like in LA or New York or somewhere more fashionable where it's pretty simple, you know. T-shirts is like essential, and hats, you know, you can make a brand off of that, while you know, if you're in the mainland, there's a lot more you're gonna have to do. But yeah, I feel like being in Hawaii, like, and doing fashion is a lot easier to do it. And the way I create is I create out of like my emotions or positivity or ways to relate to people in some sort of way, you know? So it's just like, I think people aren't like just buying a t-shirt, you know, from my brand. It's a lot different. You know, if you look at the aesthetic of the shop and like the whole message behind, you know, the brand, it's a lot more than just clothes. So like people are kind of like buying into it because they might relate to it, you know? So it's a little different. And I'm fortunate to be able to create like that because I feel like being able to create off your emotions or how you feel, you know, it helps so much with being more creative and thinking of something better. So that's like the way as of right now, and how kind of I've always, you know, especially when I got better at designing or creating something, that's kind of where my brand creative design type of shifted.
Awesome. So we do have a question from one of our guests, from Rami. She asks, do either of you have a favorite creative project that you worked on or were a part of? We'll go ahead and start with you, Matthew.
I don't really have a favorite isolated project. I think part of like what is exciting about working in like, I think the media field or in what we do, which is like you put out a different magazine every odd number of months, is each time you're trying not to repeat yourself. You're trying to like push it forward or like do something different every time. So I feel like my favorite project, I mean, here's how I would answer that question. My favorite project is the Flux project, because we do work on like 14 different brands simultaneously. So of the 14, like that's definitely my favorite project if I was to like think of each thing as a project. So the Flux brand collectively, for me, it's probably my favorite because I just feel like there's nothing like it in the space. I didn't invent it, by the way. That was my former editor-in-chief, Lisa Yamada-san. So it's been my favorite in the sense of like when she wanted to move on from it and she kind of like gave it to me to do what I wanted with it, and like assemble a team that I wanted, and to work with the people that we wanted, and tell those stories. That to me is, it's sort of like this it's like this never ending project. And I think that's why it's my favorite.
That's awesome. And what about you, Drew?
I think it happened recently. I think it was like in March. I did a poem. I wrote a poem and did a collection towards it. And it was like a relationship I was in, and I kind of used that type of emotion to like create this project. But I think, and what we created as like a visual, as well as, you know, the poem, you know, the time I spent, that kind of changed, that point in my career, I guess, changed my whole, I think, work ethic. And that project, it showed how it was a success. That's why, like, in many ways. And it just like, I feel like made me work harder ever since. So that, I don't know. It was called Sweet Dreams Moon. And that was like my most favorite like design project poem I ever wrote in my life. For someone like special to this day, you know? So it was very cool.
Absolutely. I feel like there's like an ongoing thing where people in your life really do inspire the work that you really put out into the world. And I think that's so important that's a very important way to have this kind of like creative release, which is amazing. And you're doing an awesome job too. So
thank you.
I hope people keep walking into your life and keep inspiring you this way. Not in, I mean, we don't want you to be upset or hurt in any way. Awesome. Okay, so let's kind of take it back to when you were at Kamehameha. Let's just kind of think about the time that you were a student and you were kind of trying to figure out what you wanted to do. I know, Matthew, you said you had no idea what you wanted to do and just kind of threw yourself into this creative world of advertising and kind of heavily disliked it at that point. But when you were at Kamehameha, were you utilizing any resources or were you taking any classes that you kind of like look back on now and you're like, oh, I'm so glad that I did that? Or were you a part of a club or an organization that really kind of like solidified the thought of like, oh yeah, I'm so thankful for that opportunity?
Yeah, it was like I mean, I can think of a few. I definitely didn't. It's funny to say like I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like I knew what I wanted to, what I wanted to do, which is like, I wanted to be writing. I wanted to like do something like that. Or because, you know, when you're young and like very impressionable, like the things that like leave an impact on you. If you're a creative person, you're like, I want to do that. Like whatever that feeling was that it made me feel like, I want to do that. So for me, it was like, you know, a lot of books and like movies and like that whole type of like entertainment world. So I knew I wanted to do that, but I never said it out loud. Like I never went to my college counselor and was like, I want to be, you know, like, even if it would change over time, like I want to be a filmmaker, or I want to be like an editor at a magazine. Like I never told my college counselor things like that. I never even like really told my parents or like anything. So it's sort of like on the surface, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I like knew kind of like where I was going, just know how I was going to get there and what it would be called. But I think that I wasn't in any clubs, you know, like nothing like that. But I think the really amazing thing about Kamehameha that I can remember was just the access to like really unique resources. You know, like we have Pukumai Kala and like the AV resources and SPC. For me personally, I took library services because at Midkiff they have like all those magazines like stashed away, and I'll just like read those and like go through all of them and like look at all of like the old Rolling Stones and like Entertainment Weeklies and like all those types of magazines and be like, this is so cool. Like I want to make this stuff, you know, which comparatively, my brother didn't go to Kamehameha. So my only barometer for like things that Kamehameha had was like things my brother's school didn't have, which is like, they didn't have any of that stuff. So I knew it was like a great privilege to like, you know, but how life could have turned out so differently in a way. Like I would have never had like any interactions with like those types of like that history of like different types of media. So for me, that was sort of the thing that I think was really valuable to me as a student there. And also just like, you know, I was like in all the photography classes. I was like, in like all the art classes. So it's like I was never in a formal club, but just being around all like those weird kids that like that's the stuff they do and they make, like those mini informal clubs, and like all like, you know, the reference points and like, yo, have you seen that movie? You got to see this movie. It's like the best movie I ever saw. It's from like the 70s and like no one's ever heard of it. Or like this song on you got to download this whole album on Napster, and like all that type of stuff. Like that sort of like those, I guess, encounters with different people who become your friend group. And sort of that dialogue you're always having with each other in the morning, or you're having on like instant messenger, or like, I'm so glad we didn't have smartphones then, but like that type of like that whole ecosystem of like people being like, I don't want to say one-upping each other, but just being like, you got to check this out, you'll love it. Or like, this thing was super weird, or this thing, you know, like that type of education for me. Those are the type of clubs that I left an impression on me for sure. Those type of people.
Awesome. It's kind of like you built your own like holistic type of resource web. You just kind of, and there's so many different types of things.
You don't know it at the time, but and of course I joined clubs just to put on my college applications, but I didn't have the same like relationship in those clubs beyond just like, I need to put this down to apply to these schools.
Right. Exactly. How disappointing was it though, when you went to college and realized that printing wasn't free? I was devastated. I was devastated. I was like, what do you mean 5 cents a paper? I was like, oh my gosh, it was devastating. So
yeah, we're spoiled.
I mean, we're so lucky. We're so lucky. And Drew, for you, I knew that you were heavily into sports while we were in school. Did that kind of really support you? Did that kind of guidance and that discipline really kind of propel you into what this new small business venture was like? Or was it something else at Kamehameha that helped and supported in that way?
I think, yeah, definitely sports teaches you like hard work, dedication, and, you know, to be an individual as well as a teammate. But I think the biggest resource I got was, you know, classmates, meeting friends, and, you know, honestly, I think what has helped this brand get to what it is today is just being nice to everybody. You know, I don't know, maybe you guys think different. I don't know, but I feel like I tried to be kind to everybody. And now like so many people from our grade and more support because I made that friendship, and it's like that network, and that goes into college too, you know. It's like being able to Kamehameha, you have so many students there, you know, so it's just a blessing right there. And they're from all over the island. So even better that's helped me get to where I am today, you know. Of course, like sports, school-wise, I think I did, you know, I would take auto body all the time and, you know, do the easy classes over there. But it was definitely making those friendships with like everybody and anybody. You know, so I think that's definitely, that to this day is like a huge foundation for myself and this brand.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I think the school has given us, it just has helped us so much, and we don't realize it when we're like fresh out of school. I feel like we're all like, yeah, we graduated. We did it. We somehow did it. I still have nightmares that I didn't get my diploma, but we did it, which is amazing. And then we later down the road realized how many resources we had at the time. And when everybody was telling us, utilize them, you know, meet as many people as you can, do as much as you can, you could look back and you're like, oh man, either you wish you did do it, or you're just really happy and thankful that you actually had the time and the opportunity to do it. So in the chat, Auntie Jackie said, thank you, Matthew, for saying Napster. I feel a little less old today. So
I'm not going to even comment on that one. I'll just leave that. I'm not going to comment.
By that time, I think we had a bunch of proxies up at our school. I mean, we were issued laptops, so we couldn't even access much. So that was unfortunate. So Facebook, nobody could get on Facebook.
That's hilarious.
So because this is really focused for a lot of our younger alumni, because we are looking to a lot of the newer generation, they really kind of look to us now for the answers. Is there something that how would you kind of what kind of conversation would you really have with somebody who is interested in your specific field? What would you tell them? What resources at Kamehameha would you ask them to utilize or to really tap into to make sure that they have a successful transition into either post high school or into the career straight out of the gate? Matthew, do you have any kind of words of wisdom?
I mean, I have a number. I think it's like knowing, so if you're talking about media specifically, I mean, you're still trying to like figure out like what you want to do in it. I don't know. To me, it's like one of them is to just consume media actively. And by that, I mean, it's like when you're reading, if like, say you want to be a journalist or something, or you want to write celebrity profiles or whatever it is, it's like when you read those things or you encounter those things, like when you're reading it, you're like actually trying to understand how it was constructed and the choices that journalist or that editorial team or whatever creative project made. Like what were the choices they made or the lack thereof of choices that they made, and that's why it didn't turn out the way that you think was successful. Like, I don't know, you can always be like educating yourself while you're engaging with the things that you love. You're not just like passively sort of like encountering them. Also, I feel like, I don't know, it's like on top of that is like, it's the type of career where like you have to be committed to learning all the time. You know, like I always feel like when I finish work, like I feel like I always go home with like homework. Like I have things I got to read. I have like things, like I have an interview coming up, so I have to like educate myself on things. I don't like to go into interviews like, tell me your life story. Like I like to, you know, like I just like stuff like that. Like, so I mean, it's something, if that's like something you're into, like researching a whole bunch, like if, I don't know, just like all that type of stuff is, if you find that to be something that's exciting to you, then I think that's something you can do now, you know, like you can like try to understand like how your favorite magazine works, or like how that film or that whole director's canon of work was made. Like, what are they trying to tap into? How are they doing it? Like, I don't know, if you're a nerd about that stuff, it's going to happen naturally. And that's so, you know, but for people who are drawn to a field like that, I think those are things that you can do now. And then it puts you in positions when you're like interacting, or you're applying for jobs, or you're trying to like get a foot through the door. Like that stuff is going to come out, and like people notice those things, you know, like it's not enough to just be like, I want to learn, or I have ideas. There's those people, and those are great. But I think there's also people who are like, I have ideas and here's how I would do it, or here's how I saw someone do it. And I think that was really cool. Like, I don't know, like there's analysis to it, or there's like thought, and the passion just comes out. And I think that those are like things that you don't really have to go to school necessarily. You don't have to be working in the field. And also the difference between like thinking about wanting to do something and then actually doing it independently are like two different things. Like I can think about writing all day long, which is like, that's something that you can like, that there's use for that too. Like I need periods where I need to like think about something and ruminate and like go for a walk and like all that stuff. But then the next part of it of actually writing something, or like if it's like fashion, like actually executing the design, like there's a whole other learning process and a whole other thing where like things occur to you as you're doing it. So you just can't be thinking about wanting to do stuff, especially in a creative field, like all your life. You like actually have to do it and then like learn from whatever it is. Like, why didn't it come out the way you wanted it to come out? You know, or I don't know, anything. So that's kind of my long-winded answer to, I guess, what I would tell people.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think also too, that brings up a good point. You know, a lot of people straight out of high school, they go into college thinking they want to do that specific program. Then after a semester realize, hey, this is just not for me. And maybe I should just take some time to come back home and really kind of think about it, self-reflect. That is a really good point. You know, college sometimes isn't right for everybody, even though we do really push for it and strive for education. I think that it's self-education is just as important as well. So really good point there as well. And then Drew, for you, what kind of words of wisdom would you have for somebody who especially is particularly interested in fashion or in apparel, or even just launching their own business? What kind of words of wisdom would you have for a recent alumni or young graduate?
And honestly, I think just finding something you're passionate about and enjoying to be able to do what you do every day will change your life. You know, I worked a corporate job for 3 years in a staffing firm. It was a Fortune 500 company. You know, money's there, all that stuff, but this was my passion through it. And there's been so many times in the back of my head that I'm trying to achieve this goal, but there's those like roadblocks or obstacles that kind of stop you, or this comes up, or there's an excuse, you know, but I think you just got to take that leap and, you know, strive to achieve the goal. There's always going to be, you know, trial and error that's going to happen and failure, but you got to overcome it and it's going to take you far. Yeah, it's just once you find something you're passionate about, you'll be so much more happier. Don't worry about the money. You know, you'll make that happen eventually. But yeah, just being consistent. For the start took 7 years, and through the 7 years, you know, I graduated college. I worked at Genki. I substituted. I stopped doing the brand and, you know, having gaps like many of times. I had a spot in the Honolulu marketplace for like 10 months. I would park my car at Ward at like 6:45, bike to downtown by like 7:30, work from like 8 till like 5:36, bike back to the marketplace, work till 8, then, you know, go home by like 9 and have dinner and things like that. And that was Monday through Sunday.
Wow.
And 12 to 5, but that was like a everyday journey for 10 months. And I applied for the spot in 2017, but it was actually the corner spot, which is like messed up. And at the time I was bummed, you know, because it was something like I really wanted. But I think like that was like the beginning of my career, like in that industry, like staffing industry. But if I didn't go through what I did, you know, to get here, I think it would have been harder. Like the transition was a lot smoother and easier. And I got a better spot on the block, you know? So God has a purpose, or you have a purpose in life and God has his timing, you know? You kind of just got to roll with it and just, you know, continue to do you. And if you're passionate about it, just keep your head straight and stay focused and work hard, of course.
Awesome. Yeah, I really admire the hustle that you both bring to the table. It really shows because you both are working on such amazing projects that, again, is here in Hawaii. And that's so amazing to see our alumni doing amazing things here. So that was, again, part of what this event was really for, is to really just uplift the alumni who are doing amazing things and have them kind of speak to everybody else and kind of bring those words of wisdom about, you know, finding your passion. You know, in due time, you will find it. You know, that hustle that Drew mentioned, I think that those things are so important, and those are things that we need to be reminded of constantly. I know that everybody's kind of in a crazy state right now. We all are, because of this pandemic, but it does give us some time to really do some self-reflecting and really connect with the people, including people in our own network who have amazing opportunities and can talk about those opportunities as well. So we have a few more minutes. So I was hoping we could open up the kind of like the panel to any other questions that any other registrants here today may have. You can feel free to unmute yourself or just write it in the chat. If not, was there any any cool projects that Drew, Matthew, you guys want to tell us about to kind of look forward to?
Yeah, we come out with stuff every week, so we kind of keep it secret to the week. Wow. But of course, Black Friday is coming. You know, Christmas, we have a big drop, all that stuff. But yeah, next year should be exciting. Just, you know, I think the whole pandemic and this year kind of like, it put me in a different zone and mindset than ever, mentally, physically, emotionally, that, you know, I'm excited for next year with what's coming up. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And, you know, slowly, of course, carefully, be doing pop-ups and whatnot. And one's going to be with my dad. So, like, he thrifts for me, like, every day. So I think that project would be probably the coolest because, yeah, just that's my dad. And he collects Aloha shirts, and we're gonna do like some like Aloha local type of thing. So hopefully like by February that will be here.
Nice.
But yeah,
cool. And then awesome. Yeah, for anybody that has registered today and is part of the chat, you can follow. I think Drew is on. You're at Sweet Enemy Clothing, correct?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So go give him a follow. Check out his stuff. It's really cool. It's a really awesome brand. And then Matthew, is there any cool projects that you can kind of divulge? I know sometimes you got to kind of keep it secret, but is there any cool things that you are working on that we can keep a lookout for?
We just had a new issue that came out for Flux this month. So I think that's available. You can order it through fluxway.com, or you can go to Barnes & Noble, or I think there's a number of stockists. And if you go to one of those like bespoke shops in Kakako, one of them carries it. That's like the newest thing. A lot of what we've been doing is not anything like sexy necessarily. It's just been, how can we get through this pandemic until things go back to normal? So that's sort of been like, it's more operational stuff, which is the boring part. But it's sort of like also, I think, a reality, and something that is worth sharing. I think that people are interested in getting into a creative field, like, especially if you want to like move up in it or like own your own thing. It's not just being like, here's all my amazing ideas. Like there's a whole other element of it that happens behind the scenes that people don't see, that supports what you're putting out with in a collaborative environment with other people. So, understanding that aspect of it too, it's like, just be prepared for it. It doesn't have to be your favorite thing to do. But you have to, like, it's just a reality.
Totally. Yeah. And we're hoping that everything kind of gets better soon. We're just, I guess, praying and crossing our fingers and toes and everything at this point. It's just been crazy. But again, thank you so much to everybody who joined on this call, especially thank you so much to Drew at Sweet Enemy Clothing for participating. Thank you so much, Matthew from NMG Network, for participating as well. I'm so happy that people came to this. This is just, again, this is an amazing project that we started just, again, out of a small idea from other young alumni who really wanted to see this come into fruition. So again, thank you so much to Auntie Dancine and to Auntie Jackie for this opportunity. This is amazing. And thank you for asking me to be your host. And then any other questions? We have somebody who is joining from out of state. We have somebody from out of state.
Wow.
Nicole Furtado. It's Nicole Furtado. She's from 2011.
Woo!
And Ramey's from Oregon. So thank you so much for everybody for joining. Auntie Nancy and Auntie Jackie, did you have any kind of last words or housekeeping that you guys want to talk about for alumni?
So I'll wrap. You want to go for? Okay. Well, I'll go. I'll take it by age. So thank you so much, Drew and Matthew, for doing this, and of course, Banning. Banning was part of our first group, and when he stepped up to the plate, the other 10 people that were on, or 6 people were on, were voluntold. So, and we were very happy that he said, "Oh, I want to do this." What I do want to share is that thank you so much for registering, because everybody who attended will get a little gift in the mail within the next week or so once we get back into the office. So we want to share that even though you live afar, like in Vegas and in Oregon, we'll send a little swag item out to you. So make sure we have your correct address on the registration, but we want to make sure that we send something. And it will not be KS brownies. I'm just letting you folks know right now. Because we're getting ready to do a ship out to East Coast, and they were like, "Is it brownies?" I'm like, "No, it's not." So Nicole, no, it's not. Sorry, because she joined us last time. But we just want to say this is a great opportunity. If anybody else, stay connected. And I think I want to turn it over to Jackie.
Thanks, Dance. I just want to mahalo again, Banning, for providing this idea and a couple of guinea pigs in Drew and Matthew. We appreciate your doing it. And I want to just say to everybody else who's on the call that we're going to do this again. We're looking at dates and we're looking at topics, and we're super excited to know that there is interest in doing it. So please keep a lookout on social media at Kamehameha Alumni. If you haven't already registered for the alumni community, please get on there, alumni.ksbe.edu. We're still in the middle of our naming challenge, if anybody wants to throw their hat in the ring. And then, just reach out to us anytime you ever have a question, suggestion, you want to throw something our way, alumni@ksbe.edu. And that's all I got for today.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
Bye, Lilia.